G'day Bifrosters, look at what we have here. This is Houdini, Apprentice, Non-Commercial 18.5.499. Why is this here? Well, this is here so that we can take a look at what we're trying to build. And I have all set up here already. I've got a grid and I've got a sphere. And I've just got a null for the moment so we don't have to have a look at anything. Zoom out a bit. So this is going to be an exploration of the mountain node, because the mountain node is what we're going to try and create in Bifrost. We're also going to try and add our own little flavors to it, because there's a couple of things that are a lot easier to do in Bifrost than they are here, and possibly a little bit faster as well. So let's have a look at what the mountain node does before we do anything else. So we'll go to the switch. We'll take that to 0. And let's have a look. So this is our grid. This is just a simple grid with 100 by 100 divisions. And really what we need to look at is what options do we have here that we're going to need to replicate? Well, this is how the mountain node works. It essentially displaces objects along their normals, displaces points along their normals. You have the height. And if you remember from the last installment in this series, we've already got that. If we go to the side, if we take a look at this in the side view, in the front, like that, then you can see that looks awfully similar. I mean, it's nicely shaded and everything, but it looks awfully similar to what we were building with both our one-dimensional noise and later on the three-dimensional noise. It's just a certain amount above and below the 0 line. So I think we've probably got that covered okay. Let's get back to the perspective. This is our amplitude, essentially. This controls the amplitude of the noise. So we've already got amplitude set up. Element size. That looks an awful lot like frequency to me. So we've already got frequency and amplitude. So the smaller that is, the more frequent it is, the bigger it is, the less frequent it is. I'm going to happily call that frequency. If it's not frequency, it's very close and we'll be able to work our way through it. Scale, well, that looks awfully similar to frequency, except maybe you can scales on the X. Yeah, we've already done that one. And it scales on the Z. We've done that one too. Are you starting to see why I put this together the way I did? You know, I'm going to nicely pretend it was on purpose, even if it was. But anyway, pulse length, that's something we'll get to later. That essentially only comes into play when you've got time, and it controls how fast the time runs on the noise. We'd have to keyframe that to get that working. That's going to be a few lessons away, but we are going to do it, so don't forget it. And if I forget it, hold me to it, the three of you that speak to me. I'll get back to factory defaults again. So this is just the control of the main noise. So we have amplitude, we have frequency, we have three-dimensional frequency, offset. No, I didn't do offset. Offset offsets the noise, so it moves it. So that's our phase, basically. We've already done that one too. So that's in the Z, that's in the X, and do you remember in the Y how it looked a bit watery because it's just displacing? Yeah. Offset here is the phase, world space phase. Pulse length and time we will get onto later. So these are all the main controls. Center noise is the only other one where it centers it at the 0 position. If you see, when I take this off, I will pretty much bet you almost anything that that's displaced by the amount of normals that it has. So this just makes you do it around the center. We can implement that if we want to. We're just taking a look to see what we're going to build or what we can build. So that's pretty cool so far. We've actually nailed most of this already. We've got amplitude, we've got frequency by axis, we've got phase by axis, pulse length and time we'll get to. It just involves a time node and we'll sort that out. Noise settings. This is where we're going to have to be a little bit more creative. And do we want to recreate all of this? Sinusoid, let's just get a bit of height there. Sinusoid is essentially just a sine wave. Turn that back on. have I got some offset? I do have some offset. That'll be why. Revert. I don't know why that's gone flat, so flat, but anyway. What this is essentially is just a sine wave. It's not even really noise, it's just a sine wave. And you can see it. So yeah, we can do that. We've already done that. We did that for practice. That's fine. We can do that. That's fine. No problem. Purlin. Now, this one we're going to have a problem with because Bifrost doesn't have a purlin. And that's kind of okay. If we want to build our purlin, we could do it. We could do a purlin. Purlin isn't too difficult. It's basically make a grid, get some vectors, multiply up those vectors, blend all those vectors together. But we don't need to because we have Simplex. So I think we're going to lose purlin. We're going to turn periodic purlin into periodic Simplex if we can work out how to do it. Sparse convolution we'll have a crack at, but I've already tried and I didn't manage it last time. It's going to take a lot more research for me to get that nailed down, but we'll have a go. Flow noise, that's already exists in Bifrost. We have anything like a Simplex noise that has a time input. If you hook up the time input, it becomes flow noise, as far as I'm aware. Don't trust me. Periodic flow is the same as periodic purlin with a time hookup. So we'll be doing periodic Simplex if we can with a time hookup. Then there's Wally noise. But this is definitely one of the first new noises we're going to generate. And I'll show you how to make a good Wally noise. If you've seen me playing around with crystals on the Slack channel, this is pretty much how I did it with the Wally. We'll do F1, we'll do F2 minus F1, so you get the crinkly bit there. We'll do Manhattan, we'll do Chebyshev, and last but not least is Alligator. And we'll have a go at Alligator as well. Now, do we want to add anything else? There are several other kinds of noise that we could start playing around with. One of them is Voronoi. It's very similar to doing Wally noise. There's way too many points in there right now. Let's do something like that. It'll go away and have another think, but there we go. You've all seen this. It's in every VFX movie that's ever existed since about 1993, one way or the other. We could do this as a noise pattern, so we scatter points randomly across the surface, and instead of making Wally, which is, if you remember, Wally, get them out of the node, Wally, which looks like this. Instead of getting Wally, we could do that but with straight edges. More or less, we can do a Voronoi pattern. Moving on from the type of noise, pretty much I might use Wally every now and again. Alligator is pretty good for some things. Simplex I use all the time. That's about it. That's really about it. So it's possibly a little bit hitting a fly with a sledgehammer, but we're going to have a look at doing this. Let's have a look at some of this post-processing stuff that we might want to add in as well. Let's get a fairly severe Wally going on. Oh, before that, of course, we have the terrain stuff. Now, this was the stuff we were talking about before. You remember I kept talking about fractal Brownian motion? FBM, fractal Brownian motion. So this is what Houdini uses to add detail to its basic noises. So there's your basic noise. And we'll get some detail added to it. You can see the shape of the basic noise is still there, but it's now got all this real funky detail in it, and we can do stuff like lacunarity, which is a function of the frequency. We can talk about the max octaves, and you can see how it gets more and more complicated the further up you go. We can do that too. That's just the number of noises. We did that in our stacking noise video. And then the roughness, how rough or how smooth the whole thing is. Flow rotation's really only if you've got flow noise. All of these here, these three at least, are only applying to this. They don't change that at all. So if I turn that off and start to see, nothing happens there. And you've got a couple others here as well. Let's just get some more octaves to make it a bit more interesting and make it a bit more rough. So we're kind of trying to do some mountainous terrain, maybe something like that. Yeah, it's possibly a little too frequent. That'll turn it into hills, but that'll be okay. So it's just a nice little random, you know, sort of terrainish looking thing. A little So you've got FBM standard, that's just fractal Brownian motion. Then you've got terrain. And what that does is it keeps the peaks and flattens out the valleys. So you get something that looks a lot more like terrain. Doesn't do proper erosion. To do that you would need a height map and go full on to the terrain tools in Houdini. But, you know, pretty good. Pretty good. You can still change the roughness. You can see how the peaks change a lot faster than the valleys do. So what the terrain setting does is it's just FBM noise, but it's flattening out all the low values. We'll be able to do that too. Hybrid terrain is halfway between the two. So it's halfway between that and that. So it's like still fairly flat in the valleys. In fact, it's very flat in the valleys. But you've still got the peaks going on. You can mess with your lacunarity to get more stuff. And we'll talk about how all this works as we go through. But all of these are basically this noise plus this noise with whatever you've done to it, then with different settings in the high and low ranges. They're essentially eval-f curves. So that's how we'll have a crack at it as well. Our goal here is to get not to rebuild this node exactly the same, but it's to get the same functionality out of it. Post-processing, fold. I have a feeling that this just works on Simplex. Yeah, it does just work on Simplex. Get that down. You see how everything's... First of all, everything is now going up. There is no real lows anymore because it's all folded. And you might be able to see it better if I do this. Instead of valleys, it's basically just folding. And that's done by taking the absolute value of the height. In this case, putting it on the bottom. You can also put it on the top. If I fold and complement, that's what you'll get. So you're now starting to see real similarities to sand dunes and things here. Oops, I'm changing the wrong thing. If I check this element size up a little bit more so it doesn't appear so. So you're starting to get that kind of windswept idea, and you can kind of get some cool stuff going on by just adding a bit of roughness to this as well. But this we can do. This is just taking the absolute value. Complement is taking the noise values away from 1. Because don't forget, we're doing all of this between 0 and 1, or between -1 and 1. Then we're multiplying it by the amplitude. So anything we want to do to the 0 to 1 range, we can do. We can use exponents, we can use 1 minus, we can use 1 over, we can do all sorts of stuff. But that's what fold and complement do. And oops, I didn't mean to do that. And then last of all, I'm going to need a bit more rough noise and a bit more height. You've got the clipping minimum and maximum. So if I raise this, you see that gets to about 0.3 before anything really starts to happen. And I will bet you that this is about 0.3 of the total height. But you can see what that's doing. That's filling in your valleys. That's your low clip. 0, yeah, 0.3. By the time you get to 0.667, you're pretty much gone. And then the same with the height. So it's just clipping everything. And this is an if statement. This is saying if point is higher than 0.662, point equals 0.662. That's all this is. And we'll set that up and do that too. So that's the mountain node more or less. You've got recompute normals, which will do by default. Lattice warp we are going to do, we will talk about. Lattice warp, I believe, will actually warp the domain of the noise. So that's like taking one of these happy little FBMs and then using another FBM to work on it. So you can get some very nice noise with that. And it's going to be one of the last things we do because it's a bit more complicated. We need to get our base node working first. So we're not going to go for the things like stacking different kinds of noise at this point. We could, but it does really make our interface something horrible and hard. So we might work up to that, but to start with, we're going to try and replicate this where you've got a type of noise, Wally will do, and then you've got some detail on top of that noise. So you've got a type of noise, you've got some settings to do stuff with, like this. You've got all kinds of, oopsie daisy, you've got frequency, I probably need some height to show you anything, don't I? So you've got, oh, not the Y doesn't work. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so you can scale it, you can offset it, we can do all of this sort of stuff. We'll get all this working first, and then we'll add our detail as well. We'll build our own FBM node. We could just use fractal noise as well, but we can also build our own to see how it's done. It's good practice. We can talk about linearity and roughness. We'll do clipping, we'll do folding and complementing, and then after we've got all of that working and we're happy with it, we'll get onto lattice warps and doing stuff like that. And the one thing that I haven't shown you just yet is this doesn't have to happen in Houdini. This doesn't have to happen on just a flat plane. Okay, this can happen quite happily on a sphere. I should have probably made that sphere a bit bigger, but you can see the idea. So now this is the same Wally noise. If I flick that switch like this, you can see there's the plane, there's the sphere. It's the same noise. It's just being applied along the normals of a sphere, and the normals of a sphere point outwards rather than upwards. I'm pretty sure we could take the mountain node we make in Bifrost and use that to affect points as well as polygons, because really we're just going to be affecting the points anyway. It's going to be a very short jump to just having it affect points rather than polygons. So there's the planning session. Sorry I didn't sketch anything, but you're probably better off with me not sketching something because I can't sketch. But this is what I plan to do. I'm going to leave Houdini open. I'm going to just leave it open, leave this little rig set up here, switch between the two so I can take a look at what's going on. And we'll check back as we go. And that's a good thing to do, is just to keep checking back as you go, so you can see how your node is working, how this node is working, and we'll see if we can get something a little bit better, because I'm pretty sure we could also put in a mask system where you could mask this noise with another noise, but that'll be an extra. Let's just get this working and then we'll move on to the next one. All right, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.